Any questions for Christine while they get the PowerPoint up? Oh, maybe it was clear. Yeah, okay. Thank you, Christine. And I really hope the visuals come through on this one. So cross your fingers for me. So Christine very nicely gave us a foundation of some general guidelines and principles to think about when, especially the emphasis on communication and telling a story. And those are the same guidelines and principles I'm going to talk about in this presentation. They're just going to be applied specifically to displaying data in research graphs, as well as displaying information in policy briefs. So Christine has started off nice and broad, given us a framework from which to work from, and then I'll be taking us a bit very specific, and you will hear next slide a lot because we're going to go kind of rapid fire through some examples. So you could go ahead and go to the next slide here. So Joy asked me to present on data visualization because she said, Irene, all the slides and the things you do look so nice. You should do that. You probably know how to do that. And I am not an expert. And so I wanted to direct you to one of my favorite data visualization blogs. Her name is Stephanie Evergreen, and you can go on her website and click to sign up for her blog, and then you'll get kind of her news posts every so often, a couple times a month. It's not spammy. And she works primarily in evaluation, but I think that's a very nice crossover with a focus on policy. And some of you actually might be evaluators. And what I really like about the field of evaluation, I come from the field of evaluation as well as social psychology. I got a dual degree. I like evaluation because it's very applied. And so these are the people who are going to really think about data beyond just publication. They want the data to drive decisions because they are interested in moving the needle in applied settings and in providing information to make data informed decisions. So I really do recommend Stephanie Evergreen. And then there was a lot of different approaches. So Christine very nicely highlighted lots of different considerations and frameworks for data visualization. I'm going to stick with the two that she's written in this, you see at the bottom, this publication here, Design Principles for Data Visualization and Evaluation. So if you'd like to go through this further, that's a really nice clear-cut paper, and she has a lot of different visual examples. And when we're talking about data visualization, it makes sense that you're going to want to actually look at the visual examples of what to do and what not to do. And I think that's really, really helpful. So we'll start going through that now. But before then, next slide. Okay. Again, to echo what Christine said, and I don't know if you've noticed, but I've watched Christine present a couple of times. And Christine does something very unique and very good. She always starts with a story. And I see, you know, it's afternoon. People have had lunch. Some people are sleeping. I'm not going to say who, but some people are. Okay, but then Christine gets up there and she goes, let me tell you something about my personal life. Everyone, right? Because it's innate. Even as researchers, we like to think, we just go in the numbers and we can just, you know, do research all day and just read blocks of text. But someone gets up and tells a person's story, your attention is spiked. Stories drive everything. They're so important. So our data should tell a good story. Our data is only as good as when it's communicated. You know, if your data is a tree that gets dropped in the forest, no one here, did it really fall kind of thing, right? Did it even happen? So it's really important for funders, researchers, stakeholders, general public, policymakers. When data is communicated well, everybody wins. Next slide. Okay, so these are the two pillars that we'll use throughout the rest of the presentation. Very simple, very easy to remember. Cognitive load. You really can't carry more than 4 items of information in your working memory at one time. I've only given you 2. So hopefully when you walk away, you'll remember these 2, simplification and emphasis. Okay, so go ahead to the next slide. First, we're going to talk about these principles in communicating research data. We're going to go through a graph. So next slide. Okay, so I will say the colors are off and it's making this look a lot worse than it is. So Christine mentioned, please do not use the default. formatting that Excel gives you. So when you go and you highlight your rows and columns and you click Insert Graph and you go to a histogram or a bar chart and you just hit Select, don't leave it, please. It'll take 5 minutes. You can do very simple things to clear it up. So this graph you can't tell, and so it won't make a lot of sense when I go to the next slide, but please do. Okay, so the first one had grid lines. You know what I'm talking about, the grid lines, the faint lines behind the bars. Okay, so you can't see it. I think probably the contrast or something. Remove those. Or if you must have them, remove the data labels. You do not need both. So this is under the pillar of simplification. You don't want to make the same point twice. If you've made it once, don't make it again. And any visual clutter, call it visual clutter, that you can remove is going to be the benefit of your audience. They're going to be able to read your data and understand the main point more quickly. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay, so hopefully you can see, again, it's a little bit hard. The default graph had a gradient fill. I've also seen 3D. And I don't know if you've seen 3D recently, but it looks so dated. It just brings me back to when internet was dial-up. It's please don't use it. Don't use gradient. Do a solid fill. And this is in general to, again, reduce, if you want to get your point across quickly and efficiently, you want to reduce anything distracting. So you don't want someone to sit there and think, why is this 3D? Why is this gradient? We want them to be able to focus on the point that you're making. Go to the next slide. You can also very quickly move the legend where the eye is drawn. So here I've moved the legend to the title, but you very quickly want to know, okay, I'm looking at these 3 colors, what do they represent? So now you can see substance use by age, you're looking at smoking, alcohol, and drugs. Okay, because before then, you weren't sure exactly, you had to go searching for it. So you want things to be as efficient as possible and where the eyes naturally scan. You go to the next slide. Okay. And this is where I think things really improve, because some of you were squinting a little bit and maybe, you need your glasses, but maybe some of you also, it was hard to tell what was going on with the graph. So while you want to, and we've moved on to emphasis, while you want to have things simple, you also want to include emphasis in the right places. So adding visual weight, you are adding, so it's not necessarily in conflict with simplification because you're doing so intentionally. You want to make sure that it's very clear. So we've increased the bar weight and we've increased the size and we've bolded the data labels. So everything is a lot easier to see instead of having, and the default setting is quite skinny, it's quite small. And so by just making these few adjustments, your data looks a lot more visually appealing. You go to the next slide. Okay, and this is where, okay, we've lost the plot a little bit here with the way the projection's set up, but you also want to use color strategically. So again, Excel will just give you any old color. You could change your colors to maybe, what I would do a lot is if the funder or the organization had a brand or a logo, I would match the color to the brand or the logo. You do want to have some consideration, especially if color blindness comes into the mix. You want to consider not to use green and red as colors because often those are the most common colors that don't come through if you are colorblind. But here, just imagine with me, so you can see these data labels. This was, I believe, a light gray, and this was a dark gray. But the purpose of this infographic now has suddenly changed. Now you can tell we're specifically looking at what? Can anyone guess? What are we focused on in this graphic? Alcohol, yes. So if I want to make the point that, sure, we have substance use in the ages of 20 to 24, but we really ought to be looking at alcohol, I can make that point just by emphasizing, and I know it looks like everything else has gone away, but having the 2 different gradients of gray means the data is still there. You're not saying disregard it, but you're saying right now I'm making a point about alcohol. And if you're writing a policy brief where you're trying to convince them to care about alcohol use and this age range, this is a very appealing approach you can use. You can go to the next slide. And then again, so not that emphasis and simplification are at conflict with one another, you just have to be thoughtful. So you can add elements back in. because you might have already been naturally drawn to the jump, right, in between 23 and 24, and be wondering, why is there a jump? So you can anticipate those things as the person putting together the document, the slideshow, the brief, whatever it is, and answer the questions before they're asked, and put information in that you think is going to be relevant to make your point. I have no idea if that's the age that happens, but that was just a hypothetical. Okay, you can go to the next slide. Okay, so that's where we started. Next slide. That's where we ended. So hopefully that makes it clear that where we started with the default setting of Excel is cluttered. It's a bit confusing. You don't know what the point is. And where we ended, we're very clear on what the point is from a very quick glance. Okay, so we can move to the next slide. The other idea, and Christine mentioned this, is infographics. You could use a chart or you could not use a chart at all. So this is very similar information. And here all I've used is icons here. And you probably saw these slides before, right? So this is a different way to represent the data. I could have done it in a bar chart or a histogram or a line graph, but I've used icons instead. So you have options at your disposal. Okay, next slide. So you saw this before. You could write it just like this, text in a block paragraph, nothing highlighted, just run on block text. Or next slide. It didn't show up. Okay, this is my visual again that didn't show up. But just imagine you have other little profiles there. And this is, I mean, you'll see this particular trick where they have the people lined up and they highlight the percentage. So if it's 20%, they have 5 people lined up, 1 is highlighted. This, you see it all the time. Just, it's okay. You can copy. You can do what other people do. It's one of the simplest places to start is using this trick. Go to the next one. Okay. So what I've showed you before has all been using Word or PowerPoint, and you can do a lot in Word and PowerPoint, especially please don't underestimate in clicking insert icon. It's as easy as that. They have a ton of icons. You can search them. You can all the time go in there, school, healthcare, right? Idea, light bulb, things like that. It's a lot easier if you use a different tool. So how many of you are familiar or heard of Canva? Raise your hand. Okay, maybe about half the room. This is great. It's really easy to use. It's free. You can sign up for a free demo. If you want to, let's say you have a deadline and you want to, they have these pro options available in there. You can do a free trial for 2 weeks, multiple times. I've done it. Then you just cancel and then you a little bit later sign up for your free trial again. But it's a web-based software. So you literally go to canva.com. And once you start working, it's very intuitive. It's kind of like drag and drop. It's much easier to work than PowerPoint. And it's mainly to tell these visual illustrative stories because you can really do these fine adjustments where I think, especially in Word, also a bit in PowerPoint, when you're trying to move things, sometimes things like they flip, they go sideways, you can't get, they resize, they disappear. Canva, it doesn't happen. It's a lot easier to use. So just to recommend that tool, go to the next one. Okay, so this is very similar information created in Canva. So you can just see, like, it just takes, and I've been working in these, visuals for a while. I can immediately tell when someone's done an infographic in Canva versus Word. It's very, this already, it looks fresh, it looks modern, it's updated. Versus, you can really try your hardest in Word and PowerPoint, but it's always going to kind of look like you've created it in Word and PowerPoint. And just by switching to a different tool that I promise you is very easy to use, you can kind of elevate quickly the messages you're trying to convey. You can go to the next slide. Okay, so how can we use these principles in creating policy briefs? Again, I've only asked you to remember 2 things, simplification and emphasis. Go ahead. Okay, so not to pick on, who's from Ghana here? Okay, hopefully no one here wrote this policy brief. And if you know the person who did, don't tell them I used them as an example. But this is an example of a 2-page policy brief about mental health care in Ghana, specifically looking at budgetary issues. So we're going to look at this policy brief and look at what could have been improved and examples of a policy brief that I think did do the improvements that I think would have benefited this policy brief. So we can go to the next slide. Okay, so here there is no, and I think Joy mentioned this, Christine mentioned this. There's no key summary. There's no executive summary. It just starts off directly in an introduction, which as a researcher, I emphasize, but please do a key messages, key findings, executive summary. Because again, these policymakers and decision makers, they want to be able to very, very quickly scan and get the gist of what is trying to be communicated. So if you go to the next slide. So this is an example of a policy brief from the WHO. It's a few more pages. I think it's about five or six pages. And one of the interesting things is, yes, to keep in mind, yes, the policy brief before was only 2 pages, but it's crammed with text. And it really is better, if possible, to stretch out and go 4 pages and not put so much text on each page, because then you can do things like make these visuals that actually will make it quicker to get through. It might take that person 5 minutes to read through a very text-heavy policy brief, but a policy brief that's twice as many pages but has more visuals, they're going to get through in half the time. So this very nicely, and by the way, I can tell that this is created in Canva. Can you tell? Yeah, it's immediately I recognize these icons. So very nicely, they've put out the key messages at the beginning, and the first page is just the key messages, which is perfect. If you're only looking through very quickly to see if this even relates to you, you can very quickly tell if it does or it does not. We'll go back to the old policy brief. And the next slide. Okay. These key issues, they're just put in a paragraph. They could be illustrated with icons so they stand out. So if you go to the next slide, we can see how the WHO one did. So this is the next page, right? So they have their introduction. And here you can see they have the infographic to make it really clear what are the categories, the areas of focus they're going to talk about within this policy brief. Go to the next slide. They have some data. There's data scattered throughout, but there's a particular section here in the last paragraph where they're talking about the availability of essential medicines and how it's declined. And that's like a really missed opportunity to visually show something and not tell it, because it gets lost in this like sea of text. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see in the WHO, they did, and again, they did not tell the story of the data with a graph, they did it through infographics. So they've got a nice summary here, mental health at work and numbers. And you can see, I have a little pointer, but see what I mean? This gets used all the time, where you have the little people filled in to understand, again, because it's easier if I say 11%, you go, huh? But if I say, this is a group of 10 people, 1 out of these 10 people suffer from this condition, suddenly it makes you perk up your interest. Next slide. Okay, so if this feels overwhelming, you're thinking, this is great, Irene, but I like Word, and I don't want to use Canva, and I don't think I'm going to be good at infographics. Don't worry, you still can start small. You don't have to go full graphic designer route. So if you go to the next slide. Okay, the contrast is bad, but hopefully you can see this is another example of a policy brief that I think is really well done, very elegant and simple, and I think very, very approachable and easy for anyone to do. So you can see here that the design overall, it's very simple. It's cluttered. You have headings and subheadings very nicely arranged. They're only using really the key color of orange. They've chosen one color. There's not a lot of colors going on, but they've used it sparingly and they've used it well. They have a picture. So like Christine said, a photo is really, really nice and eye-catching, and it's breaking up all the text. So immediately it just makes it look more attractive. You're drawn to it. You want to learn more. It's a very beautiful picture, very artistic. And so it incites your interest. And then they have key recommendations, and all they did is put a box around it. That's all they did, but already it looks so much better than the previous one we saw. So hopefully that inspires you. You don't have to go full graphic designer. You can stay in Word, but if you just employ a few of these elements, I think you can still very much elevate the communication and really give importance to the data you've put a lot of work into collecting and trying to communicate. Next slide. So in summary, If you want people to care about your data, you need to make it visually appealing. Keep your charts and graphs simple. Just think of visual noise. How do I clear this of visual noise? Consider the story your data tells and emphasize your main point. And using color is a great way to do that. Consider telling the story like you could write a block of text, you could write a bullet point, but can you get the same information through by using an icon, a picture, or an infographic of some sort? It's not just Canva, there's InDesign, there's all sorts of different software that you could use. So maybe you experiment a little bit and find something. And maybe right now they're creating one that will be popular within 1 year and Canva's replaced. So maybe you'll find something that you enjoy working with. Make the key findings easy and separated from the text. Break up the blocks of text with visuals to keep interest high and so that people don't feel like they want to sleep immediately when they see your policy brief. Draw attention to your main point. It's okay to start small and have fun. So that's it. Thank you very much.